Welcome back to the class, everyone. Typically, when we're in actual gameplay for Galaxy of Heroes, we want to be utilizing our character's special abilities as much as possible. However, there are some instances where characters are better off using their basic abilities. So that's really what we want to do in today's video, is we want to take a look at about 10 different situations in which a character's basic ability is not so basic. And the first character that we'll be looking at in this scenario is going to be our good friend Commander Luke Skywalker. And to really understand why his basic ability is so superior to use the Force and call to action, we need to understand what Commander Luke Skywalker's current role is in his team. When he first came out, he was very so much the leader as well as the damage dealer for the team, in which case using call to action to swap stances and gain 50% critical damage was a great thing to do. However, ever since he's come out, we have added Chewbacca, 3PO, as well as Chewpio to his team, really surrounding the team with a ton of damage, both through max health with 3PO's exposes, as well as Chewbacca's max health damage, the constant assisting out of turn, and as well as the massive offense boost that is coming from Chewpio's unique. Now that that has all happened, we have to recognize that Commander Luke Skywalker's main role in the team is overall survivability, and in addition to that, turn meter, turn meter, turn meter. And one of the best ways that he's going to be consistently generating a ton of turn meter is by using his basic ability. Whenever he gets to go and he can apply speed down and defense down, he has the chance to give, assuming they land, he has a chance to give the rest of his team turn meter because of its binds all things. He also gets even more turn meter himself. And the great part is, if you have the leadership Zeta, then even if these debuffs are resisted, he is going to generate more turn meter for his team as well. So it's a win-win scenario, regardless of the debuffs land or not. In addition to that, we also have the ability to land a stun, which is again another debuff. And with 3PO on the team, he's going to also try to land an expose every single time he uses his basic. So we have this massive amount of debuffs that is all going to be generating turn meter. And why it's also important to be prioritizing the basic over, say, this special, is because when we do use call to action, we are going to lose all of these things, including 10% turn meter whenever another rebel ally takes damage, which is very important because the key to taking down the rebel team is to kill both the Chewbaccas. And if the enemy is going after them the entire time, us not using the learn control ability is pretty important because we want to be gaining turn meter ourselves. That way we can therefore give the rest of our team turn meter and keep calling everyone else in to assist, and ultimately just doing a lot of damage and ripping the enemy team apart. I will say, going back a little bit, I don't want to talk too much trash on use the Force here. This is indeed very good because it has debuffs and can do everything we just talked about, and it is also a dispel. You do want to save it specifically for when you need a dispel, so the basic still ends up becoming a little bit more of a priority, but that special is specifically good. It just has its very specific job. Next up is going to be Kylo Ren Unmasked, a very good character and overall great tank for the game. You do want to use the halt ability when you can, as it is a 2-turn stun and also allows crew to taunt, which is great. However, oh my gosh, this ability sucks. Focused Rage, crew's other special, not good at all. You deal physical damage to the target enemy and recover health equal to the damage dealt if the target is stunned, deal double damage. Nobody in the right mind is using crew on any team that he can be in. He can be in quite a few teams as the damage dealer. And the little incremental damage that he's adding to the team is not changing anything at all. However, if you are using his basic, not only are you going to be applying tenacity down or maybe even giving our good friend SLKR more ult charge, but in addition to that, you are going to be maintaining your taunt, assuming the enemy was debuffed. This is really important because one of the things I see the AI do a lot, and I myself have done in error a few times, is when you go to use Focus Rage, you are at a high risk of actually losing your taunt, because when you use halt, let's say the first turn, you're only taunting for one turn, and you really need to be able to use this to be able to go and therefore taunt for another turn, whether it fell off just because of the one turn or you just lost it entirely because someone dispelled it and you didn't immediately gain it back because you weren't under a SLKR lead or something like that. So overall, again, crew, great character. This special, very good, but the basic 9 times out of 10 is going to be better than Focused Rage, which really does nothing, not only for himself, but for his whole team, because if he's not taunting, what is crew really doing? Next up is going to be Emperor Palpatine, another character similar to CLS, whose specials weren't necessarily bad when he first came out, but have aged poorly as his role in his team has changed. So Emperor Palpatine, with or without Starkiller, it is going to be fairly advantageous to be using his basic as much as possible, because once he lands shock on the entire enemy team, he's going to generate even more turn meter for himself, which with the whole train that is entirely going, especially now with Mara Jade calling him into assist, even without Starkiller, it's going to be great. And then even if you want to add in Starkiller on top of that, you're going to be using Starkiller's basic, which charges them, does more damage. It's really cool overall. Now, let the hate flow. This ability isn't... It's not good. I mean, everyone gets health steal up. That's never mattered ever. You do gain like turn meters, so I guess that's nice. It's almost like you didn't even take the turn, so I guess if you're trying to go around and things, that's fine. But really, the actual ability that can harm you, and in some situations this can be good to be able to shock the enemy team for 2 turns, but one of the issues is if you dispel certain characters' shock, this can really harm you in the long run. Not only are you going to miss out on the extra turn meter from not having all 5 of your enemies shocked, but in addition to that, characters that were going to gain passive turn meter, like Old Ben, CLS that we just talked about, they are going to now start gaining that turn meter, and they actually might take a turn faster, even with a 2-turn stun, because they were able to gain turn meter and they weren't just stuck behind because of the initial shock. So there are going to be opportunities when you still do want to use this, particularly if Mara Jade is right up next and she can use her AoE shock, and it can be like almost nothing ever happened. You get the shock and the stun back to back. But there are going to be a lot of circumstances where it's just best to start spreading the lightning, have Starkiller come in to assist, get him up, and ultimately just knock everyone down. So Emperor Palpatine, again, very good character, but as his role in the game has changed, his basic ability has gone up pretty high in value. Not to mention, the more shocked enemies out there, the more max protection he gains if you have his unique Zeta. Next up is going to be General Grievous, a character who, again, his specials aren't necessarily bad, but there are times when it's going to be advantageous to use the basic ability. I do really like Grievous Wounds, not just because it sounds like a cool name, but because it is pretty consistently going to be good when you're removing enemy turn meter. In addition to that, hitting a lot of target lock and gaining a lot more of your own turn meter. However, that being said, the healing immunity on the basic ability is quite important, especially when you're looking at taking out large characters like Jedi Master Luke or Sith Eternal, when you're trying to focus down on that one enemy in particular, especially because our good friend Skittering Horror here can't actually reduce max health of Galactic Legends, nor can it stun them because Galactic Legends can't be stunned, and overall this ability just isn't that useful in those exact scenarios. There are some other ones too, even like, let's say you're going up against Jedi Knight Luke as well. You can't really stun him as well, and taking his max health isn't going to be that much of a joy for you. And in addition to that, there are some instances very similar to CLS where the ability is better used maybe on your 2nd or 3rd or 4th turn when you actually have a viable character that has a debuff that you can still steal all or some of their max health, because if they're not debuffed, you don't get to do that at all, and you're probably better off just using the basic ability to begin with, which already does have good damage, can't be countered, healing immunity, which is overall very useful. So again, Grievous, good character, good specials, but there are going to be a lot of times where it's more advantageous to use his basic versus Skittering Horror. I believe that was the name of it. Next up is going to be our good friend Pet, and again, we have some situational specials here like the AoE days. There are some situations where this is very nice, but if you don't really have an enemy that is going to be gaining turn meter comparison to your troopers, there's no point in using it right off the bat. Imperial Ambition you do want to use one time at the very beginning, put it on Dark Trooper or whoever, and get it going. After that, you're pretty much going to want to stick to the basic ability every single time. And the reason why is every single time you use the basic ability after that, you're going to be calling in 2 allies to assist. One random Empire ally, and then the one that has inevitable failure. When you do this, you are going to be generating 2 more stacks of Emperor's Trap, which is therefore going to generate 20% more turn meter because of how all the interactions between Admiral Pet and Veers work. If you keep going back and using Imperial's Ambition every single time, then you are actually going to be gaining less turn meter because you're just going to be giving yourself offense up, and you're not going to be calling anyone to assist unless you have range there, in which case I guess you would have gotten 3 assists using your basic ability. So overall, again, basic can be very nice. The AoE can be detrimental in some situations too, where let's say Malak is on the enemy team and you don't really want to get feared because you want to kill off the weaker characters before having to deal with Malak. Next up is going to be 5s. This is going to be primarily for an offense when you're using them on offense, whether under Shock T or our good friend General Skywalker. I will note that you can use Cover Fire, which is his special ability, while General Skywalker is standing. It's great to use then, calling General Skywalker, hit someone really hard, it's awesome. But if General Skywalker has sat down because the enemy beat him up quite a bit, you really don't want to be taunting. And the reason why is because we want to, through tactical awareness, share all of our massive stats to the rest of the team. And the only way we get to do this is if Fives isn't the first character to die. If they go after Rex or Echo or Arc and beat them up and drop their health all the way down to 0, Fives will sacrifice himself through his ability and pass all the stats. If he's taunting and dies first, he doesn't get to do that. And some of the AI is actually smart enough to go after Fives when he's not taunting, but not all of it is, and that can be a crucial error where you would have been better off just using the basic ability, which quite frankly isn't that bad. Speed down is pretty cool, especially if you're trying like a raid cleanup like we ourselves did a day or two ago. Next up is going to be Tusken Chieftain. Again, special isn't necessarily terrible, but at the same time, and the AI does this too, this bugs the crap out of me. Grant all Tusken allies protection up, I guess that's fine. Dispel all debuffs from them and reduce their cooldowns by 1. The big problem here is Tusken Chieftain's base speed is atrociously high. Like, my mods are not that good and he's already passing 320. The reason why it's bad to use this first is because if he's going first, why are we getting rid of the debuffs that A, aren't there, and B, reducing the cooldowns that were already completely cooled down? It doesn't make any sense at all. You are much better using this on your second or even third turn after, say, Warrior has already exhausted both of her specials. You give them right back to her, and you make things really problematic for the enemy team. Obviously, if they have debuffs out initially, then go ahead and use it, especially if everyone else is ability blocked or something like that. But for the most part, you are safe just using Ceremonial Dance immediately. Start your Tuskens off with some momentum. They love having that pretty consistently, and I guess you also get to deal a little bit of damage to the enemy team. Next up is not really going to be one specific character, but it's going to be a little piece of advice when using Mother Talzin's leadership. Mother Talzin's leadership does a lot of cool things, but one of the things that it does is when one of her 2, 3, 4 of her Night Sisters are dead, whenever another Night Sister ally uses a basic ability, they will call in a random defeated Night Sister with 50% health and call to assist, then revived immediately if the enemy is defeated. The reason why we want to be spamming basics sometimes with this team is because we can abuse the revive and death mechanics that the Night Sisters have pretty much across the board. Oldaka herself gets a bunch of max health whenever an ally is revived. Asajj Ventress gains a little bit more of an offensive boost, and it's actually whenever an ally or enemy is defeated, but ultimately works out to be the same exact thing when you're calling in these assists via Mother Talzin's lead, because they get revived and die pretty much simultaneously. So what we're looking at here is an opportunity to abuse that mechanic when 1 or 2 of our allies are dead, to just keep spamming our basic abilities to increase our health, our turn meter, or overall damage, and ultimately just take the enemy down by not allowing them to take a turn and just filling their entire team up with Plague. Marin also will assist a little bit with that, not only with the Plague, but in addition to that, she is supposed to have some turn meter mechanics that revolve off of her and her allies reviving and dying or something like that. Next up, we need to talk a little bit about these Jedi, and not because they're Jedi, but because they all have one pretty big similarity, and that is the fact that each one of their basic abilities is going to be a dispel. And I will say their special abilities really aren't that bad. Like, I actually really like Protect and Maneuver for a few reasons. Take Charge is pretty cool too. Force Judgment's pretty garbage. I guess we could skip that one if we want to. And Shaak Ti's abilities they're okay when you're not in a clone team, but they're not the best thing. But why are we talking about them? Because if you're up against a team that has a taunting tank, and especially if the taunt is not that sticky, it's much better a lot of the times to just dispel it, call it a day, and have the rest of your team go after one of the more important characters that isn't a taunting tank, like a support or attacker or something of the sort. So again, maybe not what you want to do every single time, but I do see a lot of situations out there where I'm like, you really should use the basic ability there. You would have had access to all these other characters if you would have just done it to Wrecker, and now you can't. You're stuck behind him because for whatever reason you decided to try to get offense down on the enemy team, which really wasn't going to move the needle at all. Or again, with Shaak Ti, a lot of these abilities don't do a whole lot without clone troopers, although there are some kind of neat tricks there, especially when using it with Gidmay and or Jedi Master Luke. So overall, basics might be better, especially noting what the dispel does. Last but not least is going to, well, actually pretty much least, is going to be Grandmaster Yoda. And I won't lie, he's number 10 on the list because I thought 9 would be a really weird number. And this is a pretty rare instance where you're going to want to be skipping the Unstoppable Force ability. I do really like Master Stroke as well as Battle Meditation. You're going to want to use those in like 9 times out of 10 scenarios. I guess the AoE might not be great if Malik's on the other side and you want to fear yourself, but that's pretty specific. But anyways, getting back to why we might not want to use Unstoppable Force. And the reason why is, If we're trying to take more turns than our enemy and gain foresight and stuff like that, and they have very low turn meter, we're probably a lot better off gaining our 40% turn meter ourselves rather than trying to strip the 70% that they might not even have to begin with. This does, of course, flip once that enemy character, let's say Grievous, has over 70% turn meter. You're much better off dropping it rather than trying to get the 40 yourself. The only advantage here is you do get some nice other things in here like foresight, and the 40% turn meter can't really be resisted, so to speak, whereas if we're using Unstoppable Force, this does have a potency and tenacity check, so it is not guaranteed. But overall, basic ability is still pretty good for Grandmaster Yoda in some situations where over that one special that we were talking about. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know what other characters, other situations that might be more or less niche, where the basic ability really does come in handy and is going to be better off than using the specials. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, stay awesome.